And we're live!
Hello and welcome to another live demonstration. Today I want to keep it really simple, and you cannot keep it more simple than one colour, one brush. That's all I'm going to use, and you can see all the tones you can get. The colour I've chosen is indigo, and the brush I'll be using, because I know I'm painting quite small, is a size 8. So indigo, the reason I've chosen this colour is because it gives me much more tone possibilities. So it's a dark colour, so I can start really dark and then bring out all the tones of this colour really down to a very weak solution, really light. So the colour I've chosen, you can choose any colour you want. You know, do swatches and see its possibility. But for me, this has given me the darkest darks and the lightest lights, so I'm going to use it. The image I'm using is Winterton Lighthouse. We visit the area regularly and we just love the view, and this is a really inspiring lighthouse. And actually, while I'm painting, I'll probably tell you a bit of history, because even when I'm painting a subject, I like to learn about the subject I'm painting. So I actually learned quite a few interesting things about an image that I've seen over the years regularly, but never knew much about it. So starting with some clean water, I'm going to wet the background so I can start off with the sky. Now, using the one colour, I may jump around a little bit. Firstly, because I'm doing the image all in one and areas will be wet when I need them to dry. So I may jump around, but I will explain why. I'll be jumping around, wetting into the lighthouse there because that's where the glass is, and you can see the sky behind. Normally, if you wanted to, you could use another brush for this process, a natural hair brush, which holds plenty of water and just makes you applying it a little more simple. But you can do it still with just one brush. And you'll surprise yourself how big a brush you can usually use, even for very fine detail. So just wetting around and over the lighthouse. The sky goes behind these railings here. What I'm going to do is, if I tip my head, because I can't tip the board because again Gary's taped it down to stop me tilting it, you can see it's shining when it's wet. Sometimes if you do have difficulty seeing, I use a little bit of tinted water, so you can then see what you're doing. I just want to make sure it's really wet because it means the paint will do the work for me. So I have a little card here. It's not the same paper, but it's just an offcut of a piece of paper I was using. And what I want to do is, just before I apply the colour, because it's one colour, I want to make sure I've got the right tone. So just checking. And I know this colour will dry lighter. I'm just going to put on the sky and just push it around the lighthouse and into the sky. Because the paper's already wet, that does a lot of the work for you. It starts to diffuse the colour across the page. I want to make sure the sky goes into the lighthouse there and goes over where the see-through barriers are on the original. You can see I'm not getting overwhelmed with where I'm putting the colour. It's just starting to work itself around, and that's what I love about watercolour, how it kind of works itself. If you do it, just add some colour into here. I'm not worried about where it's going so much. So that looks quite a dramatic sky. I want to, thought I had a piece of tissue. I want to create a clouds, because there's some clouds in here. So easy to do. I've tested this colour and it's quite a good lifting colour. So just using kitchen roll, and you can see how well you can lift out some light clouds. And again, just want to take it through the lighthouse because that's glass at the top. Just add some more little clouds. So those clouds have lifted out really easy. I'm just now going to give them a little bit more tone. So I'm thinking about tonal values by just creating a little bit of dark underneath. My brush was too dry there and it was picking up too much colour, but just tap it on your tissue and you can take this down again, remembering to bring some of this colour through the lighthouse and just add some of these little dark clouds around. And you can see how it's looking quite effective, and I've not done very much at all. It's the paper and the paint has done a lot of the work for me, which I like. So here looks a bit too even, and that is something you have to look at when you're doing a composition, and it's really easy to do. Your brain thinks very evenly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break this up and just put a few more marks in, just to change it from being 3 stripes and 3 clouds at a very even distance. I'm just going to change them a little bit, and you can see there that that's kind of changed it and not got them as even and as regulated, a little bit more random. I'm just going to drop in some darks. Don't want to fiddle too much. What I do want to do is maybe darken the horizon a little bit, because the darker your darks are, the lighter your lights are going to be. And this is a white lighthouse. That's good. I think it will dry and it will look very different. So that is drying, but I want to start to work at the top here. So I'm going to work downwards. Normally you could wait, let that dry, and then come back into it. So I'm just going to try and see if I can put on the colour here without it bleeding too far. So I put on the colour first. Now I'm going to move it with my brush. Now the photograph is very flat colour. I didn't really get a lot of light. So this is when, as artists, we can start to think about what we want to achieve from the light, from the painting. And I'm being a little bit more controlled. Just put in the dark. And I'm not a lot of paint. You don't need a huge amount of paint, because I'm going to use my brush to bring the colour across. And let it settle. This is only a first layer. Because it's the same colour throughout, you're not going to have many problems with it muddying, i.e. mixing lots of colours together and creating a brown, because it's the same colour. So what it means is I can do lots of nice layers and really start to build up the form. And I don't have to rush ahead and mix my colours, because that's not what I'm looking for. So the top of this lighthouse is black, but I want to just give it a little bit of a shadow, so it's not a solid black. And there is a little square here which I have missed, but using that same lifting out technique, I can lift it back up and paint round. You'll see I'm often dabbing my brush just to take off too much colour. Okay, that's better. Now I can bring and sharpen this edge. So it seems to be mingling with the sky at the moment, but I'm not worried about it, because I know I can let it dry and I can then add another tone to it. So I'm just going to bring out these struts here. And I want to show you how simple you can keep it. You don't need to overwhelm yourself with detail. And with the one colour, the beauty about it is you can go back. So dark here. I'm probably being a bit too subtle, but it means I can go back in and darken. And then the shape here. So just making sure, because it's a solid unit, just want to make sure my edges are a little bit more solid, less wispy. I want it to be different to the background. Okay, so that's simple. It's just put in the darkness. You can see how that's starting to form. Now, what I'm going to do as I go down here is this is the time I want to now start to just give a little bit of structure to the lighthouse. And I'm just using clean water here because I want to keep it white, but some of the sky had encroached into the light. So I'm thinking the light's coming from this direction because I've got a dark, no, it's coming from this direction actually because I've got dark on this side. So I want to put dark on this side of the lighthouse. Now white, putting darks on white, you need to be a little bit more subtle. And remember, colours do dry half their tone. And I'm being very careful not to put anything on this side. Keep it white. Let's show that it's a white unit with the sun coming down on there. So I think that's building up quite quickly. And I think you can do that with one colour, one brush. You're not having to mix and think about your colours. What you're thinking about is getting that shape down. Why don't we take a break for a few moments and now let that dry, and then that means I can start to work on the detail and get nice crisp edges. So join me in a few moments and we can continue with this demo.
Let us bring out the artist in you. If you'd like to learn how to paint or improve your painting, the SAA is here to inform, encourage and inspire you every step of the way. When you become an SAA member, you get so many benefits, including the free bi-monthly newsletter Paint, packed with inspiring step-by-step projects, fascinating articles and detailed information to get your creative juices flowing. Discounts on over 13,000 art products featured on the SAA website and in the Home Shop catalogue, with free order line and free delivery in the UK mainland. A devoted SAA team on hand to answer your questions and give you the confidence and motivation you need to start painting and develop at a pace that suits you. Plus, a free welcome pack filled with gifts and practical help to get you started, as well as the opportunity to make friends with like-minded people.
Best thing of being a member is the inspiration from the magazines, to be able to purchase things at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, you get the reduction on all the materials, the advice you get.
I can shop from home.
It's a community.
It seemed like a very friendly sort of organisation.
If somebody's thinking of joining, don't spend too long thinking. Just join. They'll love it.
Hello and welcome back. So during that break, what I get a chance to do is look at the image I'm painting and then look at my work. I've not been touching it, but what I've been doing is looking at it and thinking, oh yeah, this bit needs doing, this bit is working fine. And it is always useful, even at this stage, to walk away, take a break and come back to it, because what it does is it focuses your mind when you look at it again, and actually you're not overwhelmed with, I need to do this, need to do this, need to do this now. It just says, actually, that's already done. So what I'm going to do, I've had a little chance for the sky to dry, so hopefully I should now be able to add a darker tone. And this is where these swatches come in well, because now I can see that the colour I'm going to put on, whether it's dark enough, is it going to give me the tone I'm looking for. So it's always handy. If you've got a painting that you really don't like, cut it up. Use the paper for these swatches because it really does help. So now I'm just going to start to bring out, because this is a black roof, and so I need to make sure I show that it does really have some solid colour. And you'll notice how much the colour faded. This is normally watercolour as it goes into the paper. And this is where you can now start to add the layers. Still using the same technique as I used in the first application. Just being a little bit more controlled about where I put the brush. You can see how that's really making a nice solid shape. Get a really fine point if you roll your brush while you're working and keep it moving. So just don't want to still lose some of that lightness. What I'm going to do, normally you would add these details at the end, but I'm going to do it now because it means I lean on the paper, and I want to try and stop doing that. So if I add it now, it means I can work downwards. Well, that's not as much as I wanted it. It'll do, it's fine. So now looking at this area, it had the lamp in it. It was built in mid 1600s, burnt down, has been rebuilt about 1680, and is now used as a holiday let. But when I was looking up about the lighthouse, I got really excited because Daniel Defoe mentioned it in his trip around the Great Britain, I think by sea, and Winterton Lighthouse is also mentioned in the Robinson Crusoe book because it's the first area he was shipwrecked while he was going around the British coast. He was shipwrecked north of the Winterton Lighthouse. So, very excited to learn that. I know it's me being a bit nerdy, but I just like to learn, a little about what I'm doing. Same with if I'm doing an animal or a flower, I just like to learn a little bit more. So that feels a bit flat at the moment, so I'm just going to add some darkness. And I'm not worried about what it actually looks like. You can tell there's something in there. What's happened is, I don't know if you can see that there's no reflection here, so I'm just really need to clean my brush. This is a strong colour. Just want to add a little bit more reflection. So I'm going to work back down and I'll come back in here because I've lost the struts, but I know I can put those on with a final tone. So here I want to make this a little bit more solid. It's a solid base. And here, just bring out the shape a little bit more.
Shani who's watching says, nerdy is good. There's no need to be ashamed of being nerdy.
I just love learning about everything and anything, so I just really enjoy it. I mean, we've seen this image for years. We've been going for absolutely years. And I didn't know anything about it until yesterday. And thank you. Thank you for watching, but yes, learning about things is just so much fun. Okay, I want to straighten that off a little bit. The paper was wet here, so I've not been able to create a crisper line as I'd like. Not worry, I can go back. But what I'm going to do is, if you look at the picture, this is quite dark. So I want to just show that this is quite dark. My brush got a bit dry there. And you'll notice I'm putting the tip in and only using a little bit. Just straighten that window, it's not a wonky window. So now just putting another colour on, but I want it quite light because I want to just bring out some detail around the window. Okay, so I need that area to dry. I'm going to work onto the grass. And often when I'm painting, I will stand because I feel you've got much more movement. So I'm going to create, there's some bushes here, and I'm just keep wetting my brush and changing the tones. Let the brush create the shapes. Just keep rolling it. And you can see how there it creates the texture. Maybe add some, drop some dark in. I'm not worried about the particular shape of the bush. It will work itself out. What I am going to do is make sure I create a dark tone here, and I straighten up the lighthouse a little bit. By creating that dark tone, it suddenly pushes the lighthouse forward. So it may not be quite the same as the image you're seeing, but this is where as artists you can really make things much more dramatic than you're actually seeing. I want to just darken. And again, probably just let it dry and see what happens. These are a little too sharp for me. So just change the way I hold my brush, and I'll hold it on the tip now, just to give a little bit more of a softer edge. So it's not just the one colour and all its possibilities of colour, but it's also how you change and hold your brush. Using it on this side here to create texture for this area. Using it on the top to stipple and soften. And turning it to keep nice sharp edges. It's better, it's much nicer. Again, create some darkness over this side. Being very careful to not change the shape of the lighthouse. This is really difficult to go back into the sky, but I could cover that with a bush. Go, it's covered now. You'd never know. Okay. Again, just using and changing the way I hold my brush. Just change hands, it doesn't matter. What it does is it gives you different textures. You can see there, get quite a dry brush. Give you some really nice soft textures in there. Again, make sure I've got some darks, because that will really make the lighthouse sit forward. Right, just going to add some more tones into the foreground here. And the foreground will be much darker and much more detailed. Just pushes things forward. And I might do something with that lighthouse because at the moment it's very white. But I'll see how it finishes, because these things I can just add on. So tip of my brush, and I'm going to add some of these really long grasses. I did know what they were called, I've forgotten. And you can see here how I'm just using the brush to create the texture, just moving it around. This is why I'm standing, because I've moved my hand up to the tip and using it like that, and you could get some lovely marks this way. So practice holding your brush and changing ways that you hold it in order to get your different textures. Right, they're all quite upright at the moment, so I'm just trying to. And I'm not too worried about how it's looking at the moment, because I know it will change. Just the paint changes itself. It will often make a painting look better than you think it is. Just bring it through. And I'm keeping some of that light in the background. That looks quite good. It looks like it's been hit by the light. Right, because the foreground is more detailed, I'm just going to make sure you can see that the grass is a little bit more clearly. Might be a bit wet, so if I just move on here and just start to really add that really darkest tone here. I want to take some of these grasses over here into the lighthouse as well. Maybe fill out some of that lightness. Now I'm starting to use the edge of my brush a bit more, just to take away some of that very fine lines. So I'm going to just think about how it's looking. Now I feel it needs just some really dark tones which have just disappeared. So these struts can go back in again, because they're in front of the area that's inside. And now this is dried, I can again just check him, taking some of the water off the belly of the brush, because I want to keep it as dark as I can. There we go, much darker. And it has railings here, which I was waiting till that dried to add on. And it's just those small little details that take it up a level. It's not very straight there, but I can fix that. Okay, that's much better. A little bit maybe darker here. And these are still just the one colour. Let's see if that will work. Oh, it started to dry. I think that's worked. One thing that's glaring at me is this lighthouse. It hasn't got enough shadow. So I'm just going to fix that. It's too glary compared to the rest of it, and I think just by putting that tone in, I think really helped. Just want to soften it a little bit. Clean water, that's key, soften this. Okay, and I think that stopped it really glaring and just, you know, not fitting into the foreground and the background. Last thing before we finish is, because this was wet and it's dried, I just want to put in these final details just to show that this is foreground. So foreground will have much more detail and will be darker. And I don't have to do it all over. I just need to suggest that these grasses are closer to you, they have a little bit more detail, and they're going to be much stronger. Okay, I'm going to keep fiddling if I don't stop now. So, keeping it simple, one colour, one brush. And you can see how you can really bring out the subject and work with the tones and the light you can see. So I hope you enjoyed that, and join me later in the week for another live demonstration.